right, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the Eynelys Show. I am your host, Eynelys Garcia, and we have a fantastic show for you guys today. We're going to get into it in just a second. First, I want to remind you guys to go to Eynelys.com. There, you can sign up for our newsletter right here, which will pop up, or you can hit subscribe right here. The cool thing about signing up for the newsletter, guys, is it will let you know exactly when we are having shows like this one so that you can watch them as they're happening absolutely for free on Rockfin. Remember that after the show is done going live, it will become a premium show. So make sure to sign up for the newsletter so that you can know when we are having shows and catch it for free. Okay. So today's guest, I am so happy to have on. She's been doing some amazing, amazing work. She is the executive director of Red Berets Medicare for All and a board member of Whole Washington, as well as, a really good ally of the People's Party. She's been doing some amazing work with the People's Party. Everybody, please welcome Laura Fielding. Hey, Laura.
Hello, how are you? It's great to be here, Eynelys.
I'm well. I'm really, really happy to have you to talk about Medicare for All, especially, we're still, even though we're getting vaccines, we're still in the midst of this pandemic. And the idea in and of itself that in the middle of this global health crisis, our government was still unwilling to give Americans health care is kind of mind-blowing. And Medicare for All is something that I talk about very often because I have a 21-year-old sister with severe autism. She's nonverbal, still in diapers, have to do everything for her. And things like in-home therapy are not considered a necessity for her. There's a lot of stuff that they don't cover, even though she's supposed to have Medi-Cal. And so there's also a lot of things that I worry about, like as she gets older, if something happens to me and my mom, I don't want her ending up in a government home. I want her to be able to, be taken care of in her own home. And I also am having a mom that's going through cancer. She thankfully just had it removed. She's going through chemo now. But, when you're going through all of these problems health-wise in the family, the last thing that you should be worried about is what doctor is a network, or how much the medical bill is going to be. So, I'm really excited to have this Medicare for All conversation with you today. So first, let's start by, it's your first time on the show, and I always like to ask when it's someone's first time on the show, tell us a little bit about you, your background, and what got you interested in activism and in fighting like this.
Thank you. My background, I am from eastern rural Utah. I joined the Air Force right after high school because I just didn't have a sense of clarity of what I would even do in college. And I guess it was, I think that it didn't feel like a good fit being raised in such a rural conservative area. So I don't know what I really thought that I was seeking, but I just needed to get out, and I did that. My first duty assignment was Osan Air Base, Korea, and I recognized really early on that the military was not a good, it's not a great fit for me. But I just, I did the best I could to kind of make it work. And just as I thought I was getting out from doing my 4 years, I met my husband, who is still my husband, who had just come into the service. And his circumstances was more like what I think a lot of people's who join are, which is that he came from a very low income family, and it's often the case that the military is used as a jobs program, an education program, a healthcare program. And I'll come back to how I got into activism. But I think that is something that I try to include as the founder of Red Berets, is kind of like, we need healthcare, not warfare, because over the years, even though we stayed in, we're both very progressive, and we both had a, you know, sort of a lot of conflict around serving in the military industrial complex. However, it gave us the chance to, he got orders over to RAF Lakenheath. So that's where I did a lot of my study, and I'm a holistic healthcare practitioner, massage and craniosacral therapy, and I do practice here locally. So I think like our experience being over in England and me studying with people, like we spent a lot of time, we lived off base, we spent a lot of time off base, and studying with these people, quite a few of whom had either currently or formerly worked within the NHS. They would just ask me things like, how can you stand to serve a country that leaves so many behind? Do you know a lot of people who have been, you know, we hear all these devastating stories of the cruelties of your healthcare system. And at that time, I kind of, I kind of shrunk into myself in embarrassment or shame, because sometimes if someone asks you about something and you can't relate to it, or you just don't know about that. I wasn't raised in a wealthy family, but my recollection of my childhood is that we could always go and see a doctor. And our system, I mean, our country really is very good at hiding from people, hiding the atrocities of our system from people who are doing okay and people of privilege, you know, even if it's like we didn't have a lot of means or great means, but I just didn't have that experience growing up where I couldn't go to see a doctor. So that was all kind of news to me. And so that was my first, that's kind of where the seeds were planted, where I kind of started to learn, wow, we don't have a great system. You know, we have a horrible system. And so it sort of planted the seeds. And then we spent 7.5 years over there, and then came back. And then years later, now living up here in Washington State, heard in 2016. I wasn't involved in Bernie's campaign, but I did vote for him in the primary, and I did hear, I wasn't much on social media, in fact, not really at all, but I also wasn't into corporate media. So I would say I did not understand anything, if people can imagine it, of what was going on. I just knew that I heard his message and was like moved to action, kind of moved to tears of joy, like, and hope of, wow, this is this is really something. This is like, you know, this sounds like kind of for the first time feeling a call to responsibility, and like maybe there was something that I could, we could all, and that I could bring forth to change. So I started getting involved once Trump was elected. I started waking up. I started the kind of process of really waking up to exactly the game of the duopoly, and I've continued to grow and learn more in all of the time organizing since. But I think so that was in the fall of 2000. Well, it doesn't, I mean, it does matter if I could get my years straight. It was you know, like the fall after Trump's election. I remember like listening to a rally of Bernie and Jane Sanders and Roseanne DeMoro talking to the National Nurses United, and then kind of remembering all of the pink hats, of which I had knit a few of, because it's not so much that I was involved in that movement. I certainly was never a Hillary supporter, but at that time you just hear from local crafters like, oh, we're knitting these hats. So I did knit some of those hats to send off to Washington, D.C. and locally here in Seattle. And it was kind of cool because we were, one of the knitting shops that was sending them to DC actually let you like kind of label them. Hey, the people that receive these, what do you want them to march for? What issues do you care about? So on the hats that I sent, I put Medicare for all. But anyway, so that was like, that kind of led me later, as I was listening in retrospect to this National Nurses United rally on YouTube, to think, oh, we should start crafting well, what can we craft for national improved Medicare for all? Imagine if we had all of that kind of craftivism towards healthcare justice. And so then I started to think, well, what kind of a what kind of a hat? Because I started imagining, what if we'd had, like, what if we could get people marching in the streets specifically for Medicare for all? And then I thought, because of my military background, that we needed a peace army. And we needed to fund healthcare, not warfare. So a beret seemed like the obvious choice, and red for National Nurses United. And then a couple months after posting about that in Facebook, a nurse named Catherine Lewandowski, who is now the chair of Whole Washington, reached out and messaged and said, this is a really neat, creative idea. I would love to come down and talk to you and hear more about it. So she drove down and did, and she said, do you know about wholewashington.org? Do you know what they're doing? Do you know about them? And I said, no, I am not connected to any activists whatsoever. I just know that, that we need to make a change, and I want to get involved. So she said, yeah, absolutely, reach out to them. So then I got very involved in Initiative 1600, which we ran in 2018. Maybe that's enough of my background. That's how I got here today.
That is kind of an incredible story. First of all, thank you for your service, because
You're welcome.
you know, when we talk so much shit about the military industrial complex, sometimes people confuse that with we hate the troops. We don't.
No.
Like,
No.
one of my best friends of 9 years, John Lockett, I talk about him all the time. He's an Air Force vet, and he has needed knee, hip, and shoulder surgery for the better part of 8 years, and the funds are somehow never there.
Yep.
So I love that line of we need healthcare, not war care, because that's exactly what it is. We have this incredibly bloated military industrial complex budget, and the money does not go to the troops. It does not go to the vets. It goes to Boeing and Raytheon.
Yep.
And that's the really sad thing, is we are putting our young men and women out there, usually ones that are poor or lower income, you know, because they need the opportunity, they need the education. And like you said, they go to the military for those things because they have no other option.
Yeah.
And so it's a really, really difficult situation that we place our young people in, and especially our poor young people. So that's the first thing. And, you know, the second thing is, I love the idea of the berets. Like, so I've been unemployed this whole time, and for the last 2 months, I have not even received unemployment. But I'm finally starting to get back on my feet. And as soon as I do, I'm going to order one of those berets, because I love the idea. I love the idea of unifying everybody around a concept. And everybody has different ideas of what the fight for Medicare for all should look like. But from my perspective, I say fight on all fronts.
Yes.
So yes, absolutely push forward to pass it nationally. But I also believe that there's no harm in pushing state to state at the same time. And so that's something that I'm really, really interested in talking to you about, is Whole Washington. And I was hoping that you could tell us a little bit more about, what is Whole Washington? What is your purpose? How can people get involved? Tell us all about it.
Yep. Thank you so much. Yep, we're a grassroots coalition of working class people. We are led by nurses. A nurse actually did a lot of the writing of our legislation. We've had a couple of bills in the. I would say that we are, like when you were saying we need to fight on all fronts. That is the organizing motto that I have been taught by Whole Washington. They are very much we. I try to keep it distinct as the executive director of Red Berets, but I'm a board member of Whole Washington, as you said. So it's like we fight on all fronts. So we always endeavor, like we just recently did a sit-in or a protest outside of Representative Kilmer's office. You know, placing pressure or demands that he co-sponsor Representative Pramila Jayapal's bill. We had a really good showing for that, and a documentarian, Kenny Ballantyne, that's a whole other story, but it's very exciting. So, and then, members of Whole Washington went to Washington, D.C. to go and a lot, in support of the first historic hearings a couple of years back. I think that was 2019, and we've organized 11 barnstorms across the state in support of Jayapal's bill. Individually, of course, Whole Washington can't endorse candidates or campaigns, or parties, but so many of the core board members and volunteers I know worked very, very hard on Bernie Sanders' campaign. So it was like, and have worked, have even run for office at the state level. And of course, we have Jason Call, who is a board member of Whole Washington, who is running for Congress against the most conservative Democrat in Washington state. So the coalition of Whole Washington is, we are truly like all activists fighting on all fronts for this issue. So I always get a little bit sticky on social media, Twitter being my primary platform, whenever people refer to Whole Washington as a purely state-based initiative. You've got, thank you for having that graphic up of I-1362, which we have now distributed our first round of petitions. We did a very small printing of 500 petitions the first time around, just to make sure there were any errors that we found, anything we wanted to change.
Can you tell us, for people who don't know what I-1362 is, can you tell us a little about that?
Yes, sorry, I branch out into all these different things. Yeah, so we are trying to get universal health care as close to single payer as we can possibly get. For all intents and purposes, it is single payer in Washington state. So we are obviously working at the state level to get universal health care. And now where we're at is we did a lot of lobbying at the beginning of the year on, we had a Senate bill that had 7 Senate co-sponsors, SB 5204. We introduced that, and as some of us that are really in the know, but some people maybe don't know this, what's supposed to happen with the legislative process is you get a prime sponsor and co-sponsors, and then it's supposed to be ushered through the legislative process. You're supposed to get public hearings, healthcare committee, ways and means, all of that. The chair of our Senate Healthcare Committee, Senator Annette Cleveland, and let's just say there are 6 Democrats and 5 research. Collectively, they've taken up over $1 million, just that healthcare committee alone, from insurance, pharma, and private hospitals in campaign donations. So what they did is they, of course, did not schedule us a public hearing despite overwhelming pressure. And what they also did is they found somebody with a fairly clean PDC filings to introduce another bill. It's a commission bill. It was only 4 pages. It wasn't actual legislation. There was no healthcare legislation. It is what it is just a call to form a commission over by the next 4 years to study, to bring stakeholders to the table to study how we can eventually move towards or implement single payer. So it was like kicking the can down the road, even though we have our bill has got the funding, it's got the funding mechanism all included. It's been approved by the State Department of Revenue. There's a financial study by Dr. Gerald Friedman, who is a progressive economist. So ours included a study, it included all of that, but they obviously did not want to give us a hearing. So where we're at right now is, and most of us who, those people like me who are very well aware, it's like we are fighting on all fronts to kind of show people, hey, these are the loops that the hoops that we're willing to jump through. We believe we do have to fight on all fronts, even though from a cynical perspective, most of us knew these people are all bought and paid for. There's no way they're going to do everything they can to stop it, whether we're talking about at the federal level or the state level. But now we are naming names. We know the people who are blocking it. Hopefully they're all going to be receiving primary challenges. It helps to just like shine a spotlight on exactly who is blocking healthcare justice. because Washington State, despite everybody thinking that we are a super progressive state, we've never even had a public hearing, or no universal health care bill has ever made it out of committee in Washington State. So now we're back, in my own opinion, to the only way that this can happen right now is via the initiative process. And we have, I think, 28 states that can run ballot initiatives. And the hope is that people will get involved and start to build their own state efforts. And we have some people within the single payer movement who for many years have kind of poured cold water on the initiative. And there's been a lot of talking points that have been run, like ballot initiatives and state level efforts undermine the movement. The only thing that undermines the movement is people pouring cold water on good efforts. We are at a point, as you mentioned, in the middle of a pandemic when we're being denied care, where we need to throw the kitchen sink at this. Everybody needs to be fighting all fronts. If people are still involved, hopefully in electoral politics, I'm not trying to throw all of that out, but the reality is, until we replace these corrupt incumbents at every level, we aren't getting this. And so a ballot initiative, we're getting out there and we're getting into our community and we're talking about the issue of, just the other day I got a signature where somebody said, is this for Medicare for all? Because I'm for Medicare for all. And I said, we are absolutely for Medicare for all. The philosophy of whole Washington is, once one or two states open the floodgates for this, it's going to topple the dominoes.
And like with marijuana.
Like exactly. And anytime when people have a disagreement on that strategy, and I could go all into a recent debate that we've been involved in, but I think I'm going to leave that alone for now. When I ask the question, what is your strategy and timeline? This goes back to exactly the arguments that were lobbed against force the vote. Anytime you ask people who were against force the vote, what is your timeline and strategy for this? It's always crickets. There's never an answer for that. And I would say it's the same thing with state level efforts. You can't spend your time, or I think it's a poor usage of time for people to spend their time undermining efforts or saying that good grassroots activists who are out working hard to educate their community and bring more people into the coalition, which eventually we are going to need in order to pass national improved Medicare for all. That's the thing that gets missed about it. It's like, well, you're just fighting for your state. Everybody needs it. It's like, nope. Every single member of whole Washington will tell you that we would much rather pass national improved Medicare for all tomorrow. We're organizers for it. We're pushing for it. We're fighting for it. But we are clear-eyed about the fact that we have veto Biden and an overwhelmingly corporately owned Congress. And then the progressives that we do have, which we donated our small donations in many cases too, are now not forcing the vote, not scheduling hearings. So a ballot initiative is where we're at.
Yeah, I think, and there's something that you were talking about when you were first introducing yourself, which was the fact that back in 2016, you were just beginning to learn about all of this stuff and didn't know as much as you know now. And that's not crazy at all, because that's exactly where I was in 2016. I was born in Cuba, so 2015 was the first time that I was that I got my citizenship, and so 2016 was the first election that I was able to vote in, and of course it was Bernie. But I look back at the information that I had in 2016 versus now, and it is a completely different world.
Yeah,
it's a completely different world, and so I don't feel bad about that, because so many of us were asleep or didn't have information, didn't know, because we were just so busy living our lives. And because here's the thing, they catch you in that day-to-day grind so that you don't have time to think about anything except surviving. And that's purposeful. That's purposeful because the less informed that you are, and the more that you've got your head buried in a 9-to-5 that's exploiting you, you're not going to have time to be engaged in anything else. So one of the things that I felt was really important was, and one of the reasons why I'm such a big supporter of the People's Party is, you know, I mean, I was a supporter before then, but for me, Force the Vote was really a pivotal moment in understanding who was willing to take action and who wasn't. So I actually worked on Cenk Uyghur's congressional campaign in 2019, back when we all supported him running, because I thought he would be the kind of person who, when the time came, would force the vote. And so for me, it's been absolutely crushing being so disappointed by Cenk and everybody at TYT, and just realizing that they were good at talking, but when the moment came for action, they were unwilling to take it.
Yeah.
And I couldn't understand. I couldn't understand why AOC wouldn't take action, why, you know, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, Jamal Bowman, none of the progressives in Congress were willing to actually stand up to Nancy Pelosi or the Democratic establishment and fight for us, which is really sad, because the whole reason that we fought so hard to get them elected was because we believed that they would actually bring change, that they would be different, that they wouldn't go in there and be automatically corrupted by a cushy $170,000 a year job, you know?
Yeah.
And so when Force the Vote came around, which, look, people can dislike Jimmy Dore all they want. Is he always right? No. Is he kind of an asshole sometimes? Yes. But that's not the point. He's a comedian. The point is, a comedian is doing more for the movement than a lot of these people who claim to be journalists and claim to be all these big progressives. So you can dislike him, but the strategy of Force the Vote was 100% spot on.
Yes.
And when the People's Party came out, not only in fervent support of Force the Vote, but they actually put out a petition. They got almost 50,000 signatures. They put together a website. They did a town hall that more than 100,000 Americans tuned into. And not one progressive from Congress that's supposed to represent us could even acknowledge it.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
It's a serious problem. Absolutely.
And it shows me, again, who's willing to take action and who isn't. And so it's really sad, because there's almost these lines being drawn on the left between those who want to do something and those who just want to, quote unquote, wait until the right moment. But the problem is, there's never going to be a right moment. They're never going to hand it to us. No. And one of the jokes that's made a lot, which makes total sense, is, imagine if the civil rights movement had waited for, quote unquote, the right moment, or quote unquote, when we have the votes. You know what I'm saying? It would have never happened.
No.
So there's something to be said about using the political pressure that you have. And that's why I'm so excited to get some People's Party candidates in there, because they're not going to have that loyalty to the Democratic Party. They're going to have loyalty to us. And so let me ask you something, for something that you were involved in. For people who don't know, can you share Danny Strong's story and why you felt the need to go fight for him?
So he actually came, Scott Denoyer came out recently. He flew across. He's very involved right now in organizing and pushing these last few days. I forget where we're at on the time. We're a matter of just a few days left. The possibility this session for them to pass the New York Health Act. But Scott and I have been communicating on Twitter, friends on Twitter, for quite some time. We're kind of he's an incredible solidarity organizer, somebody who, I mean, obviously he lost his son. I feel, gosh, it feels kind of uncomfortable to tell his whole story. Have you, well, of course you've heard it, because I think because he told a little bit of Danny's story when he was on the People's Parties, he was on the town hall with Savage Joy, I believe. But to bring you up to speed of why, like, he came out to Washington State, you know, just all throughout, like, the Bernie campaign, we've sort of run in the same circles, or kind of try to amplify each other, because I think we've seen each other to be the kind of organizers that really want to try to bridge this gap. That's kind of been the goal of Red Berets, is bringing sort of a creative way of unifying and kind of creating a connected fabric of the movement, because there's so much division about, again, like state level, national, this and that. It's like we have to come together to stop using those labels to say we are fighting for human life, we are fighting for healthcare justice, we are taking on the insurance lobby and big pharma, and we fight on all fronts. And his hashtag, of course, is Danny Strong and no one fights alone. But so it was after I was on Amped Up podcast with Ryan Knight. He reached out in the end of February and asked if I wanted to come talk about Whole Washington and a little bit about the Red Berets on his podcast. And I was super thrilled, because we've been trying to just kind of lift up and bring Whole Washington into, and I would say New York Health Act and all of the others, let's try to bring all of this into the national strategy conversation so that there's less of a split. There's been a real split over decades of work where people have been siloed into, you're a state organizer, you're a national, and it's like, let's all work together and be solidarity organizers, because we have to move together as a united front. So anyway, because we were close friends and I had mailed him a red beret some time back, and he'd taken this amazing picture of himself in his red beret and his past New York Health Act t-shirt and a Whole Washington button, holding up a Bernie sign, and of course with Danny's picture and in the background and everything. It was just, to me, it's like this perfect representation of, this is a solidarity organizer. This is somebody who is telling the tragic story of losing his son over a $20 lapse in insurance. Like, I feel like I don't want to tell it or say anything. It's Fidelis was the particular insurance company, why that, he needed his medication, and his son ended up taking his own life because, health, what am I trying to say? Well, all of healthcare is a human right. Mental health is a human right. And, when he couldn't fill his prescription, that was devastating and an impossible hurdle for him. So anyway, so after I was on, sorry, I lost my train of thought just for a second there, but after I was on Ryan Knight's program, a person named Kenny Ballantyne reached out to me to say, I heard your interview on Amped Up podcast. Has anybody done, I am a documentarian, has anyone done a documentary about the Red Berets movement? And I said, no, nobody has. And he said, really? I'm usually always somebody's always beat me to it. So he said, do you want to collaborate or, set up a meeting? And so we did. And I told him all about he had heard about Whole Washington. So it was like, Red Berets, we're the crafters. We're kind of the creative connective force. And obviously Whole Washington is the legislation and the initiative and has everything that we can do to actually get it passed. But Red Berets, we've been supporting the national movement. We've been supporting state level in as much as we, both at the same time. So when Kenny said, well, I would like to take a trip up to Washington State and interview some people and get some footage, I reached out to a couple of people. I reached out to Scott, and I reached out to Lisa Serafini. Her is at 50 Lines Only. She's been really a core person in Red Berets, and they were both able to come out, to fly out, to be a part of organizing that protest outside of Representative Kilmer's office. And be interviewed. Scott's interview has not been released by Kenny Ballantyne. That might not be until the documentary is complete, which is supposed to be sometime January of next year. But it's starting to include, it will include just basically, the way I understand it, is that he's he's telling the story of the 99% and what we're doing to rise up, despite now being again in the governed by a completely neoliberal administration, and the Democrats holding all of the houses, and still no healthcare justice. So I think the story is about people at the state level, but also now he's going to be bringing the March for Medicare for All. That's M4All.org. And that's a whole other, it's like all these pieces are coming together. So if I seem like I'm kind of going in a whole bunch of directions, the way I kind of see it is this little, these connected points of Kenny Ballantyne telling the story of whole Washington, talking about the creative efforts of the Red Berets, talking to many people of the 99%. And now he'll be covering the March for Medicare for All, which is on the 24th of July. And, the couple of the core organizers reached out to Red Berets and Whole Washington a couple of months back. And so if you haven't had them on your show, that would be, I'll give them a shout out and put you in touch with them if you would like to get some information about the March for Medicare for All that's coming up. But that's, so. Sorry?
I said that would be fantastic. Feel free to give them my info.
Thank you. Well, so that's how Scott came out to Washington State, and it was an absolute amazing honor and privilege, and awesome to meet somebody that I really did already feel like I knew. But it's like, that's how it is here. We have a community, and even if we haven't met our fellow justice warriors, those that we know from a long distance, from these kind of Zoom calls and social media platforms, we still feel, I think, very, very close, or like we know them. So then when we get to actually meet them in person, it's really incredible. So it's a special shout out to Scott Denoyer, who's back working on New York Health Campaign, but came out to stand with whole Washington, and always fighting on all fronts.
Absolutely. And that's something that I think is so important, is bringing all of these organizations together to fight. Because the thing is, it does feel like there's a cultural shift happening. It does feel like one of those moments in history where a lot is about to change. But the way that that's going to happen is by all of us. We need a general strike, number one. We need some million-man march type of thing. Like we need to hit the streets. Yeah. And we need to say we are no longer going to accept these poverty wages. We're not going to, accept being exploited by these corporations that are making billions off of us while we can't even afford to pay rent or buy food. We can't even get health care. If we get sick and we don't have money, we die. So, I mean, this can no longer be acceptable to us, right? And Absolutely. We have to show that. And by the way, for anyone who wants to learn more about Danny's story, you can watch his father speak. It was heartbreaking. Yeah. At the Force the Vote town hall that was held, where he and Savage Joy, first of all, when Joy was speaking, I started crying.
Yeah, because, me
too. And I was, it was an honor for me to be able to, include a few seconds of a clip of me talking about my sister at the opening of that. And, her medications are like $2,000 a month. That's crazy.
Yeah.
So, go to the People's Party YouTube and look up the Force the Vote town hall, and you will be able to listen to Danny's story, to Joy's story, to my story, to the story of Kyle Kalinske did a video for that. So many people that have been affected by lack of health care and lack of coverage. So if you guys are watching right now, we've been interviewing Laura Fielding of Red Berets, Medicare for All, and Whole Washington. We've been talking about the need for Medicare for All across the country, and how we need to push both nationally and at a state level to get this thing moving, and how important it is that we get all of these organizations together to fight for this. So you guys, if you can contribute to the show, fantastic. If you can't, that is okay. Hit that like and follow button and share this. That is one of the best ways to help the show grow. So Laura, before I let you go, I want to give you the floor. Give us any last thoughts that you have and tell us how people can find and support the organizations that you work with.
All right, so the first thing, please, is everyone go to wholewashington.org. I feel like it's very, very user friendly. I would say if you're in Washington State or you know people in Washington State, we do have to collect wet signatures. We get asked that a lot because we actually, we need 350,000 signatures to qualify. We have until through the end of December to gather those signatures, but that is a lot of signatures. And so we're basically saying 400,000 because we need a very large buffer for what the Secretary of State, what will end up being thrown out. So if you are in Washington State or know people, please sign up to volunteer. But I would also welcome people to please, no matter where you are that you're listening to this, please just go to wholewashington.org and sign up to be a volunteer. What this will do, you don't get inundated with a ton of emails, but we will let you know, and also where it kind of connects you up to a community that, like, we know, we have some ideas about what's happening in other states. You know, it's a good way to kind of find out, is there something going on in my state? Maybe you get some ideas about getting your own coalition together to start putting something together in your own state. What else? Yeah, so we need the 400,000 signatures. We need signature gatherers. The berets, if you know people who craft, you can always put them in touch with me through our website, redberetsmedicareforall.com. Although it's really hot right now, so I don't know if a lot of people will be ordering these, but but I will say, if for those of you who do, because you know it'll get cold again soon, we've basically been trying to help fund a ballot initiative. It's kind of tough to get people to. It gets very exciting, I guess, to support candidates, but somehow to support like a state initiative is not so easy. But I would challenge people to think about, like, if you've donated to any of these progressive candidates, hoping that was the pathway to national improved Medicare for all, and unfortunately you're disappointed, or so far that hasn't yielded results. I've been saying a lot on Twitter, and this comes from founder Georgia Davenport, Whole Washington is my candidate, and if passed, a ballot initiative does or will do what it says it will do. So it's like, let's get behind something that can save lives, that can help open the floodgates for the United States of America. What we need, what we really need, is a victory, an enormous victory that will send shockwaves across the United States. This is not just about Washingtonians like getting our own and trying to just take care of ourselves. We are all in this, like, heart and soul for this movement until we get it passed nationally. And this is the best chance that we have right now to knock over some of the establishment. And if we can get everybody to go, chip in a couple of bucks or help share out. There's a wonderful savings calculator on wholewashington.org where you can go directly to that link, share the savings calculator link. It's like a pretty eye-catching link, and just help kind of distribute this on your platforms on social media. That would help us enormously. That's, if you don't have money to give, just help get the word out. That's huge. So I think I covered it. Thank you very much.
Laura, thank you so much. I'm sure we'll talk again soon and, continue this fight, because the thing is, we're not going to stop until we get healthcare for everybody. And that's what these corrupt criminals in power need to understand, is their time is up. And we're coming for them.
Yes, we are.
So, we're no longer going to accept a standard of living that is not livable. And it's time to fight, and it's time to get everybody together. So I'm so incredibly proud of the work that you guys are doing. I'm so incredibly proud of the fact that, you know, organizations like the People's Party are supporting you guys.
Yes.
And we need to do this together. So the more that we're able to coalesce and understand that approaching these thugs from a meek perspective is never going to work, and that instead we need to be ferocious and attack and take them head on and say, we are no longer going to accept this, period. I think that's when we're going to find our true strength and really be able to accomplish some badass stuff. So I want to,
Absolutely.
yeah, I want to thank you so much for the work that you guys are doing, both at Red Berets, Medicare for All, and at Whole Washington. I hope to have you back on soon. Everybody follow Laura on Twitter. I believe it's Red Berets M4All, right?
That is correct. Can I have about 5 more seconds just to
Absolutely.
say, I really, really want to give, yes, to National People's Party for reaching out and supporting and partnering with Whole Washington and with Red Berets. We deeply appreciate that. And a shout out to the folks at Washington People's Party, because I've attended, they have been reaching out to me, asking for petitions, asking how they can help with Whole Washington. I'm getting petitions into the mail to a couple of people who have reached out to me. They showed up at our event protesting outside of Representative Kilmer's office. So I just really, really want to thank Jamin and a bunch of people at the local Washington People's Party, because they've welcomed me into the monthly meetings, and they've also shared all about the efforts of Whole Washington in their newsletter. So they're really working to lead with Whole Washington, and that's incredible. And so I'm really thankful.
Yeah, absolutely. Jamin's a nice guy. I know him. Yeah, I think it's so great. And that's what we need to do, not just at the People's Party, but all of these, lefty organizations that say that they believe in Medicare for all. Let's stand together and fight, because now is the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Laura, thank you so much. Hopefully
Thank you.
we'll talk again soon. It was a pleasure having you. And we'll see you next time. Okay.
Thank you, Eynelys.
All right. Bye-bye. All right, everyone. That was our latest interview with Laura Fielding of Red Berets, Medicare for All, and Whole Washington. She's been doing some amazing, amazing work. So check out wholewashington.org. Get involved. Yes, we are still fighting to pass Medicare for all nationally, but there's nothing wrong with also fighting on the state front. Okay, absolutely nothing wrong with it. In fact, it allows us to push on 2 different ends and can probably help us get things accomplished a lot faster, because as Laura and I talked about, Medicare with marijuana, once it started passing in one state, it kind of moved on from there. So check it out, you guys. Show some support. I want to remind you guys can go to Eynelys.com. You can sign up for our newsletter so that you know exactly when we are having live shows just like this one, and you can watch it for free on Rockfin. You can check out the latest People's Podcast episode that we did with Susie Dawson and Sean O'Brien of Panquake. Other specials like the Inauguration Day special we did with Chris Smalls and Graham Elwood. We did our Halfway There special with Jackson Hinkle, Christina Olivo, Steph Zamorano, and our 100-day special, of course, with Lee Camp, Kit Cabello, Hardlands Media, as well as our interview with Brianna Joy Gray. We've had so many amazing interviews for you guys to check out. So head over to Eynelys.com and look at our content. You can find all of our links right here. If you can support the show, you can do so right here. We accept regular donations as well as crypto, which is pretty cool. And here you can find what events are coming up, like the one today. And I do want to announce that this coming Sunday, we are going to be having an Eynelys show with the 2 guys from Hardlands Media, Kit and Daniel. It's going to be fantastic. So I will put out info for that soon. You guys tune in. It's going to be next Sunday at 3 p.m. And finally, I want to remind you guys, if you have not followed us on Rockfin yet, please go ahead and do so. We have so much amazing content, both premium and free, and Rockfin is completely ad-free. So go ahead and check that out. Thank you guys so much for all of your support. This has been the latest episode of the Eynelys Show. I am your host, Eynelys Garcia. We'll see you guys next time.